The mountain was not a place for love. It was a place where men went to forget it. High above Pine Hollow, where the wind screamed like something wounded and lost, Silas Blackwood stood alone beside the icy rush of Painted Creek. Snow still clung to the shadows. Even though it was late May, the air was thin and sharp. It cut into a man's lungs and reminded him he was small. Silas did not feel small. He was 40 years old, broad-shouldered, scarred, and hardened by war and wilderness. A jagged white line ran from his temple down into his beard, a reminder of Antietam, a reminder of blood and smoke, and the day he held his dying brother in his arms. The mountain suited him. It was cold. It did not ask questions. It did not pity. He pulled a beaver trap from the freezing water and tossed it onto the bank. His hands were numb, but he ignored it. He ignored most things: pain, memory, loneliness. His cabin sat a mile uphill, but pressed against a slab of granite like it was hiding from the world. It was not built for comfort. It was built to survive. Thick logs, narrow windows, a roof low enough to fight the wind. Inside there was one bed, one table, and the smell of smoke and fur. Silas had not planned to marry. Love was weakness. He had learned that twice. Once in Maryland when bullets tore through boys who had promised to protect each other. And once in Ohio, when Mary stood on her father's porch and told him she would not follow him into the savage mountains. She wanted streets and neighbors. He wanted silence, so he chose silence. For 20 years, he trapped, hunted, and lived alone. He spoke more to elk and wind than to people. Pine Hollow tolerated him because he brought furs and paid in gold. But they never invited him to supper. They never called him friend. He did not care until the winters grew harder and his joints ached when storms rolled in. One broken leg would mean death. One fever could finish him before spring. So he made a decision the same way he set a trap: calm, practical, without emotion. He wrote to a marriage agency in St. Louis, not for love, for help. Weeks later, letters arrived, flowery promises, soft words about devotion and dreams. He burned those. Then he found one written in hard-pressed handwriting. My name is Oliver Vance. I am 28 years old. I can cook. I can sew. I do not expect love. I expect honesty and work. If you treat me with respect, I will do my duty. No illusions, no fantasy, just survival. Silas counted out his savings from beneath the floorboards and wrote back a short reply. Come to Pine Hollow. It is hard living. I offer food and protection. S. Blackwood. That was enough. 2000 me east, Alara Vance sat alone in a train station in Chicago, clutching his letter like it was the last solid thing left in her world. That she had once been a seamstress in Boston, proud of her hands, proud of earning her own living. Then a powerful man named Sterling decided she belonged to him. When she refused him, he ruined her. He told the police she tried to rob him. Told society she was loose. Told employers she was dangerous. In the city, a rich man's lie weighed more than a poor woman's truth. She lost her job, her room, her name. The West was not a dream. It was escape. The journey was brutal. Endless plains, dust that crept into her lungs, cold nights in crowded stagecoaches, whispers from strangers who thought a mail-order bride was something shameful. 3 days from Pine Hollow, the stagecoach tipped in a flooded creek. A driver lay bleeding in the mud while others screamed. Ara tore her petticoat and bound the wound with steady hands. She sat in the freezing rain all night to keep him alive. She was not weak, but she was tired. When the battered stage finally rolled into Pine Hollow, she stepped down into mud and silence. Silas was waiting. He looked like something carved from the mountain itself. Tall, scarred, dark eyes set deep beneath a weathered brow. He did not smile. You? He asked. I am, she answered, her heart hammering. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. He saw a thin woman with tired eyes, but a stubborn jaw. She saw a dangerous man who looked like he could break bones without blinking. But in his eyes, she did not see hunger. She saw loneliness. They shook hands like strangers, closing a business deal. Inside the general store, the shopkeeper smirked and made a crude remark about damaged goods. Silas did not laugh. He leaned across the counter, voice low and steady. "You will speak of my wife with respect." Wife, the word stunned her. No one had defended her before. Not once, Jay. They rode up the mountain that evening. The trail narrowed. The world grew colder. Pine Hollow disappeared below them. The cabin waited at the top like a silent judge. "This is it," Silas said. Ara looked at the rough logs, the smoke-stained chimney, the lonely clearing surrounded by endless trees. It was harsh. It was isolated. It was terrifying. But it was not Boston. Inside, there was only one bed. Silas cleared his throat. "You take it. I'll sleep on the floor." She blinked. "You are the husband. I am a man of my word," he replied. "And I don't take what isn't freely given." That night, as the wind howled against the shutters, Ara lay under his only blanket while he sat awake by the fire, guarding the door. She listened to the steady sound of his breathing. For the first time in years, she slept without fear of footsteps in the dark. She had come expecting survival. She did not know yet that something far more dangerous was waiting in that cabin, hope the mountain tested. The very next morning, she woke before sunrise to the sound of an axe striking wood. Each swing echoed through the cold air like a heartbeat. When she stepped outside, the wind cut across her cheeks and her breath came out in white clouds. Silas was already working. His shirt clung to his back with sweat despite the chill. Muscles moved under scarred skin as he split logs with steady rhythm. He did not look at her at first. "Coffee's inside," he said. "Water's in the bucket by the door." It was not cruel. It was simply how he spoke. Ara wrapped her shawl tighter and walked to the creek to refill the bucket. The air was so thin it made her dizzy. By the time she carried the water back, her arms were shaking. She would not complain. She had not crossed half a continent to be sent back down the mountain for weakness. The days fell into a pattern. Silas left before dawn to check traps. Ara baked bread in the Dutch oven, yet burned her fingers and learned how to judge the fire by feel instead of sight. She scrubbed clothes in icy water until her knuckles cracked and bled. The mountain did not care that she had once stitched silk. It demanded strength. One afternoon, Silas came back early and found her by the woodpile, struggling with the axe. The blade bounced off a knot and jarred her shoulders so hard she nearly dropped it. "You're fighting it," he said from behind her. She's startled. "I can do it." "I didn't say you couldn't." He stepped close, not taking the axe away. Instead, he covered her hands with his own. His palms were rough and warm. His chest brushed her back as he adjusted her grip. "Loosen your hold," he murmured. "Let the weight do the work." They swung together. The log split clean in two. For a moment, he did not move away. She felt the heat of him through her dress. It was not the suffocating closeness she remembered from Boston. It felt steady. Then he stepped back quickly, as if the contact startled him more than her. "That's the way," he muttered, walking off toward the shed. Ara stood there long after he left, her hands tingling. Spring in the mountains was a liar. One evening, a storm crashed down without warning. Snow drove sideways against the cabin, but the wind rattled the shutters like fists pounding to get in. Inside, the fire roared, but could not fight the drafts that slipped through the walls. Alara shivered on the edge of the bed, wrapped in blankets that were not enough. Silas watched her from the hearth. "This cold will get worse," he said quietly. "I'm fine. You're not." He hesitated before speaking again. "We need to share the bed for warmth, nothing more." Her heart pounded. The last time a man had said nothing more, it had not been true. But Silas stood there with his hands open, waiting for her answer. "Just sleep?" she asked. "Just sleep?" He promised. They lay back to back at first, stiff and silent. The wind howled. The cabin groaned slowly. The warmth from his body soaked through the blankets. When a violent gust slammed the shutter against the wall, Ara gasped. Without thinking, Silas reached behind him and found her hand in the dark when he did not pull her closer. He simply held it. "It's just the wind," he said. She did not let go. In the morning, they woke still hand in hand. Neither spoke of it, but something had shifted. A week later, they rode down to Pine Hollow for supplies. The town had not grown kinder. Whispers followed them into the general store. A woman pulled her child aside and muttered a word knew too well. Prostitute. The shame hit her like a slap. Silas moved before she could shrink away. But he stepped in front of her and faced the man who laughed. "If I hear that word again," Silas said, voice low and steady, "I will break your jaw." There was no joke in his eyes. Silence fell over the street. On the ride home, Alara stared at his back. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. "Yes," he replied. "I did." That night, she told him the truth about Sterling, about the locked sewing room, about the scissors in her shaking hand. Silas listened without interrupting, but his jaw tightened, his hands curled into fists. But when she finished, he did not look at her with disgust. He knelt in front of her. "You survived," he said. "That makes you brave." Brave? No one had ever called her that. She broke then. All the shame, all the fear poured out of her in sobs. Silas held her carefully, like she was something rare and breakable. He did not rush her. He did not take advantage of the closeness. When she finally lifted her head, their faces were inches apart. I want to kiss you," he whispered. "But only if you want me to. No demand, no pressure, just choice." "I do," she breathed. The kiss was slow, careful. A question answered gently. For a moment, the world outside the cabin disappeared, but peace on the mountain never lasted long. A week later, a deputy rode up the trail with a letter in hand. It was from Boston, from Sterling. There was a warrant. The deputy read it aloud on the porch. Wanted for theft and moral indecency. The reward for return. R felt the blood drain from her face. "He found me," she whispered. Silas did not argue. He took the letter and threw it into the fire. "Let them come," he said. Down in Pine Hollow, a stranger in a long coat was already asking questions. Money changed hands, rumors spread. By Sunday, the town had turned against them. In church, the preacher spoke of sin hiding among the faithful. People shifted away from their pew as if carried disease. That night, she told Silas to send her away. "You're losing everything because of me." Silas crossed the room in 2 strides. "You are the only thing worth keeping," he said fiercely. He kissed her then, not gentle this time, but desperate, afraid of losing her. They fell onto the bed, tangled together. For a moment, a fear and anger blurred into heat. Then, Silas stopped. "Not like this," he said, breathing hard. "Not because we're scared." He rolled away, choosing restraint, choosing her. Snow began to fall 2 days later, and down in Pine Hollow, the stranger with Sterling's money finished gathering men. They were coming up the mountain. The first snow of winter did not fall softly. It came down like judgment. Wind tore through the trees and buried the trail to Pine Hollow under thick white drifts. Share the world shrank to the cabin, the fire and the sound of their breathing at night. Silas worked harder than ever. He stacked wood high against the wall. He checked the traps even when the cold made his bones ache. Ara learned to move in snowshoes. She learned to listen for hollow ice beneath the creek. They were no longer strangers sharing a roof. They were partners. One afternoon, the storm rolled in fast. The sky turned gray. Silas went out to check the upper trap line, but promising to return before noon. He never came back. By late afternoon, the wind howled so loud the cabin walls trembled. Ara stood by the window, scraping frost away with shaking fingers. He was never late. Panic rose in her throat like smoke. She looked at the fire, looked at the door, looked at the empty chair where he sat each evening. Then, she wrapped herself in every layer she could find, grabbed a rope, and stepped into the storm. The snow was waist-deep. Each step burned her lungs. The wind erased tracks. The world was nothing but white and noise. She remembered his lessons. Listen for hollow ice. Watch the slope. Do not stop moving. She climbed toward the upper ridge, fighting every step. Her legs shook. Her hands went numb. But she did not turn back. Then she saw it. A broken edge of snow near the ravine, and below it, a dark shape against a fallen pine. Silas, she screamed. She tied the rope to a tree and slid down the slope, tearing her coat on brush and rock. He was half buried in snow, his leg bent wrong, his skin pale. "Go back," he whispered weakly when he saw her. "I am not leaving you," she said. It took an hour to drag him up that slope. An hour of slipping, pulling, bracing her boots against ice while the wind tried to rip them apart. She tied him to a rough sled of branches and hauled him through the storm like an animal protecting its own. When they reached the cabin, yet she barred the door and cut the frozen clothes from his body. His skin was cold as stone. The fire was not enough. She knew what she had to do. With trembling hands, she removed her own clothes and climbed beneath the heavy buffalo robes beside him. She pressed her warm body against his freezing one. "Stay," she whispered into his ear. "You are not allowed to leave me." Hours passed. Slowly, his shaking eased, his breathing steadied. He lived for 3 days. She nursed him and splinted his leg, cooled his fever, fed him water one sip at a time. When he finally opened his eyes clearly, he looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. "You came for me," he rasped. "You were late," she said softly. Something changed then. Not fear, not survival. Love. When he was strong enough to sit up, he pulled her close and kissed her with no hesitation left between them. "We are not just surviving," he whispered. "We are living." By spring, he could walk again with a cane. They rode down to Pine Hollow together, determined to end the whispers. That was when the stranger appeared. Tall, clean coat, cold eyes. He carried a warrant with sterling seal. "You are under arrest," the man announced in front of the whole town. "Fugitive, thief, immoral," the crowd murmured. Shame threatened to swallow whole. Silas stepped in front of her. "You take her," he said calmly. "You go through me." The hearing was called that afternoon. The meeting hall was packed. Lies were spoken. A drifter claimed he had seen her in a brothel. A miner claimed she bewitched men. Each word struck like a stone. When it was her turn to speak, her throat nearly closed. Then she felt Silas's hand on her arm. She lifted her head. "He tried to force me," she said clearly. "I fought back. That is my crime." Silence spread across the room. The stranger lost his temper. He grabbed her arm in front of everyone. Silas shoved him back. A gunshot exploded inside the hall. Glass shattered. Women screamed. The stranger had drawn his weapon. The sheriff reacted faster. He disarmed the man and slammed him against the wall. "You do not fire a weapon in my town," the sheriff said coldly. The judge, pale and shaken, May looked at the broken window. Then at the hired gun in cuffs. Then at the couple standing together. "The warrant is dismissed," he declared. "Mrs. Blackwood is free." The room went still. Then, someone nodded. Another removed his hat. The whispers stopped. They rode home at sunset. The mountain did not look like a prison anymore. It looked like a fortress. Months later, as summer warmed the valley, Ara stood at the window with a secret. Her monthly bleeding had not come. Yet she placed Silas's hand gently over her stomach. "We are going to have a child," she whispered. He stared at her. A mountain man who had once believed love was weakness now felt his heart break open with joy. Winter came again, and with it labor. The storm howled against the cabin walls just as it had the year before, rattling the shutters and shaking the roof. Yet this time, fear did not live inside those walls. Silas never left her side. He kept her hands wrapped in his, steady and warm, whispering that she carried more strength in her heart than any man he had ever ridden beside. Through the long, bitter night he stayed, and when dawn finally touched the windows, a newborn's cry rose above the fading thunder. A son. Silas laid the child gently on her chest, and tears slipped down his weathered, scar-lined face without hesitation. "What shall we name him?" he asked in a voice thick with wonder. "Thomas," she answered softly. "For your brother." By morning the storm clouds drifted beyond the mountains, and sunlight poured over the ridge like a blessing. They stepped onto the porch, with their son cradled between them. The land remained rugged, untamed, and demanding, but they no longer faced it alone. What began as a marriage of necessity had grown into something deeper than pride, stronger than sorrow, and braver than fear. Silas once expected nothing more than duty from his bride, yet she had given him warmth, laughter, and a place to belong. And in those high mountains, where love was never supposed to take root, it blossomed anyway. If you felt this story in your heart, subscribe to Stories for Horseback for more powerful frontier tales, and comment the name of the country you're watching from. I'd love to know where in the world these stories are reaching you.